sir.
All right. We're going to go ahead and get the meeting started. We will call it to order. And I want to welcome everybody. Thank you all for participating. And Andy, will you do the roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Thanks for thanks for coming today. From Bullitt County, I know we have Keith. Who else do we have? Anybody? Felicia? I see Felicia.
Sorry, Felicia earlier. Barry Armstrong.
I'm here.
Hi, Felicia. City of Charlestown. City of Jeffersonville. How about Mount Washington? I saw Lori on there with the mayor, maybe. Gotcha, Mount Washington. Let's see, who else? City of New Albany.
Hi, Andy.
Yep.
It's Lori. We're here.
Okay, hi, Lori. New Albany, or next we'll go on to Shepherdsville. Arthur?
Yes. Arthur Jones.
See, Arthur. City of St. Matthews. Clark County. Floyd County.
Creevy here.
Oh, I saw you on there somewhere, Nick. Thanks for joining us, Nick. How about anybody from IDEM? And how about NDOT?
This is Robin Bolte. I'm here, and Carly Metcalf is on here also.
Ladies, for joining us. Jefferson Riverport. Miguel Zamora's in the room, folks, for those that are online. Miguel's in the room. Kentucky DAQ. And who do we have from KYTC? Let's start with central office.
Here,
Cedro's here. All right. How about from District 5? Okay. Here. Anybody from Office of Transportation Delivery, KYTC? I don't think so. How about Metro APCD? I see at least a couple APCD members or staff.
I'm here, Craig.
Byron's here as well.
Hi, Byron. Did I even see Bradley's name on there? Bradley's there? All right.
Yeah, Bradley's there.
Awesome. Awesome. How about Metro Economic Development or Advanced Planning? Mike or Rachel? Bradley says he's here. How about anybody else from Metro? Dirk? Emily? Thank you all for joining us. You missing anybody? KYTC District 5 is in the room. Mr. Tom Hall. Thanks for joining us, Tom.
You're welcome.
How about from the airport? How about Oldham County?
Jim Silliman here.
All right. One Jim, not two Jims today, just one Jim. Maybe the best Jim. Maybe.
No.
That's up for debate. Port of Indiana. Park Accessibility Advisory Council. How about Town of Clarksville? Clarksville on.
Claire Johnson, I'm here.
Claire? And we have a couple speakers later. For Dana and Bronte are going to be speaking later. They're from Clarksville as well. How about from TARC?
Aida, talking to you.
Aida, good afternoon. And moving on to our advisory members. Do we have any advisory members that I maybe didn't call out earlier? If so,
We just joined.
introduce yourselves. I don't see anybody. I think everybody on the line is a voting member or from a voting agency. And I will note that Larry Summers from City of New Albany has joined us. Thank you for joining us. And we have once again some tremendous attendance. One reminder that for the voting members out there in cyberspace on Zoom, we are asking, strongly encouraging that voting members have their video on during the meetings. That's not just simply because we'd rather have it that way. That's so we can live up to our end of the bargain in the form of new public meeting requirements on us and of many agencies. With that, I'll turn it back to Keith, and we certainly do have more than a quorum.
Great. Thanks, Andy. The June 2022 meeting minutes. I'm hoping everybody had a chance to review. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve, Dirk.
Thank you, Dirk. Is there a second? Got a second in the room. All in favor? Raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The minutes passed. The Transportation Policy Committee report. Andy will do that.
All right, thank you. I'll be quick on this and on one level, but I'll be elaborate on another. The last month, on June, our June TPC meeting, was more or less just like our June Ttcc meeting. That is, we had agenda items such as Amendment 7, you may recall, of our MTP and TIP. That was approved by the TPC. Not only that, we had our socioeconomic forecasts were presented to the TPC and approved by them. So, and among some other information, some of which we'll hear a little bit more about today. But one thing I want to point out from that meeting was, as you all might recall, that day, the day of that meeting, June 23rd, if I'm not mistaken, was the day 2 of our federal certification review. Okay, and so that was a two-day site visit. Our friends from Federal Highway Administration, Federal Transit Administration, and EPA were here in this room that we're talking to you from, in part. They were here and doing a once every 4-year assessment of the transportation planning process in this region. And so it seemed to go very, very well. I'll say that. I mean, I think they had some interesting questions. I think we showed them that we go above and beyond on so many facets of what we do here. I think they were pleased with what we were doing here. I think they were pleased with the way we ran our meeting. For those that, some of y'all were here, and the way we ran it was, they gave us the agenda. We created a story map. Some of y'all use story maps, or you've seen them deployed effectively, and we deployed a story map to kind of get that conversation going, agenda item by agenda item. So we had a lot of good information that we had, you know, at our fingertips to show and showcase. So I want to give a big shout out to the KIPTA transportation staff. Because it was a team effort for certain, and I think we all did very, very well. One other thing, I want to give thanks to AIDA and to TARC for they provided a bus. That morning, the first morning, June 22nd, we went on a tour and we utilized the TARC bus. TARC was generous to let us have a TARC bus. We didn't drive the TARC bus; the TARC driver drove the TARC bus. But we took a tour of several projects around our region. And then I also want to give a shout out to those that participated throughout the meeting. We had some good participation from KYTC, from Louisville Metro, and from TARC throughout the meeting in various aspects of the agenda. And so that was great to hear. In summary, they gave us some preliminary findings at the TPC meeting, and so that's very important. So it sounds like, so those findings are in the form of commendations, recommendations, and then worst case would be corrective actions. The commendations they gave us, it looks like there might be 3 of them. All this is draft until we get a final report soon, but the 3 of the things they really liked were our IAC process. That's the process, that air quality process with our friends from APCD and from IDEM and from Kentucky DAQ and others. When we do these amendments and we do that air quality conformity process, they have for a long time really liked what we do, and they share that with regions around the country. So I want to give a big shout out to APCD, and in particular Craig. Craig Butler runs the MOVES model. The MOVES is the model that EPA requires agencies to run, and Craig runs the MOVES model for this region. So I want to give a big shout out to Craig and APCD over there. They also liked our efforts in performance measures. So many of these meetings, Ttcc and TPC, you've heard us talk about our performance measures, and one thing that KIPTA does that not all MPOs have done, and then maybe none in Kentucky and Indiana have done, we've created our own regional measures, and we've gone above and beyond there, so they really like that. And so the third thing they gave us the commendation, or the attaboys and attagirls on, is for our use of GIS in our planning process. They really like that we have GIS as a major part of our planning process in the development of projects, in the resources that we put out there online for you all as project sponsors and as other stakeholders. And so that was good to hear that we got that respect. And so a big shout out to our GIS department here at KIPTA, because they're real pros. On the recommendation side, one of which might turn into corrective action, we don't know, but nonetheless, all four things they mentioned, they were quick fixes in our view. They're pretty straightforward, what we might need to fix. Emphasis on crashes, freight crashes, truck crashes as we do our freight planning. Okay, we'll get that. That's a good idea. Public involvement. They wanted to make sure that in our public involvement activities, we recognize that a digital divide still exists. That not everybody has things like high-speed internet access, not yet anyways, and so keep that in mind in our public involvement, and that's a great idea as well. The update of our MOAs, in particular our planning MOA, our current one is 2015, and so basically they want to see a new one with the new infrastructure law, okay? So for that matter, that didn't exist until like last November, and so that makes sense that we'll update it, and we'll get that done in the coming months, let's say. And then last but not least, they wanted to see a little bit different way of incorporating the cost of projects in our TIP. And so that we've got all those answers in our project database that's kind of internal. They just want us to showcase that to the public and to the stakeholders. So again, all things that are straightforward, all things that we'll get fixed. So with that, I'd love to take any questions, but if not.
Any questions or comments for Andy? Seeing and hearing none, I appreciate, yeah, we don't need any action on this.
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Public comment. Greg, have we got any public comment?
Does not look like we have anything in the chat, and we did not receive anything by email prior to the meeting.
All right. We will move on. Clarksville Heat Island Project. Bronte, you are up.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So Dana and I are here talking to you all today about our Beat the Heat program in Clarksville and really how we're starting to look at extreme heat. And we're going to be walking you all through our heat mapping process that we've gone through recently and how that's informed our heat management plan. So I'm going to go ahead. Can you guys see my screen? Okay, excellent. So like I said, my name's Bronte Merle, and I'm the heat relief coordinator for the town of Clarksville, and I'll hand it over to Dana.
Thanks, Bronte. Hi, everyone. My name is Dana Habib. I'm the principal investigator for the Beat the Heat program, an assistant professor at Indiana University in the Department of Informatics, where my research is really centered on urban climatology with a specific focus on extreme heat and resilience. The Beat the Heat program is a 2-year project where we're working with 2 communities, Clarksville, Indiana, and Richmond, Indiana, to help develop heat response plans and emergency response plans for extreme heat. The program is funded by Indiana Office of Community and Rural Affairs and supported by Indiana University's Environmental Resilience Institute. We have a great team working with us on this project, from my colleagues for the Environmental Resilience Institute and our 2 great heat relief coordinator, Bronte, who's here with us today, and Lucy Mellon, who's the heat relief coordinator for Richmond. I think this is something special about the grant, is that the grant funds 2 heat relief coordinators for both of the communities for the 2-year period of the grant. For the 2-year project, there are 5 different phases for the grant. We're currently in phase 4, which is our heat relief strategy implementation phase. Today, we're mainly going to be talking about phase 2, which is our community needs assessment. During phase 2, what we did was we really gathered information about each specific community to better understand their vulnerability, risk, and exposure to extreme heat. And all this information went to help develop different plans, strategies, implementations for each of the communities. Specifically for this presentation, we're going to talk about the hyperlocal temperature mapping project that we did with NOAA and CAPA, where we mapped near surface air temperatures for both of the communities. And then we're going to talk about why this is useful and how we can integrate that to create heat vulnerability indices for our communities as a way to be able to prioritize areas and better understand vulnerability to heat. I'm going to turn this over to Bronte so she can talk with you about the heat mapping project.
Excellent. So just to give you all some background on really how we got started with developing a heat map in Clarksville. So as part of Beat the Heat, we participated in NOAA's Urban Heat Island Mapping Cohort for 2021. So this included a group of about 18 different cities and towns, different municipalities across the country who were really interested in developing heat maps of their communities. So to do this, we actually worked with local volunteers who are able to attach these sensors to their cars and bikes bikes and travel throughout the town on a particularly hot day last summer so that they could record air temperatures in the morning, afternoon, and evening. Something I want to point out with this map is it is collecting near surface air temperature. Most heat maps really show us land surface temperature, which is helpful, but with the near surface air temperature, we're really getting a much clearer idea as to the temperatures that people are really experiencing on a day-to-day basis. So that's why, having this piece of it is so important. And so I want to show you a little bit from our campaign. So here's some of our volunteers. In Clarksville, we had about 17 volunteers participate, and we went out on Monday, August 23rd last summer to record these temperatures. We saw a high of 94.7 degrees in the afternoon and a low of 67.4 in the morning. And here you can also see a map of some of the routes that our volunteers took. So these were predetermined fixed routes that they consistently traveled for all 3 times per day. And then also you can see some of the pictures have the sensors in them. So that's the equipment that they used to really collect that temperature data. And so that was all sent out to Kappa Strategies, which is a climate analytics firm out of Portland. And they're the ones who really developed the map and then return those results to us. And so I want to show you all a little bit from our heat maps. I'm just going to be showing the evening heat map today. And this really demonstrates best the urban heat island effect, because as those, it really is the nighttime is starting to cool off as the sun is going down. Some of our cooler areas are certainly cooling off, but certain areas where we have higher and dark impervious surface coverage, such as dark rooftops, parking lots, asphalt, concrete, all of these spaces are really continuing to retain that heat. And so this map is helping us see that difference and really that distribution of heat throughout the community. And so from this map, we saw a 7.2 degree temperature difference between our hottest and coolest locations. And if you know anything about the urban heat island effect, you probably do know that tree canopies and green space are one of the best ways that we can really combat heat islands. And these are going to be our coolest places in our communities. So it's no surprise that parks ended up being some of our coolest places in Clarksville. Also, a residential area around Hunter Station Road in the north end of town was also fairly cool as well, because they do have a far more extensive tree canopy than other neighborhoods. And then we also have our hottest places in Clarksville. So our hottest location was actually at the I-65 and Veterans Parkway interchange. So people who are walking through this space on a hot day are of course going to be experiencing hotter temperatures than someone who's spending time in a park. We also saw higher temperatures around Lewis and Clark Parkway, which is where we have quite a bit of parking lot coverage and a lot of commercial development. And then we also saw one of our residential neighborhoods experiencing some of these higher temperatures as well. So the Lincoln Park neighborhood is actually kind of sandwiched between I-65 and the Lewis and Clark Parkway area. And while they do have tree canopy coverage, they're just dealing with some of that residual heat from the surrounding land uses. And so they actually see a 2-degree temperature increase compared to the coolest residential area in Clarksville. So there is some of that disparity there as well. And then I do want to point out, if you guys, we were just talking about story maps a moment ago, and if you guys would like to see our story map, you are absolutely welcome to explore it on your own and really dig into some of these results more. So this is, I have the QR code here and the link to it, and you can go through. It gives you more background on the urban heat island effect. You can also take a guided tour of Clarksville's hottest and coolest places. And there's also an option to use the spyglass tool, which will allow you to navigate on your own and really see in detail how the heat is distributed throughout the community. And again, this uses our evening map to kind of work you through all of this. And so I'm actually going to hand it back over to Dana.
Thanks, Bronte. So we can see that near surface temperature mapping can be extremely helpful in communities, especially to identify our areas of high exposures. But they can also be used for indicators and inputs to identify and create heat mobility indices. Heat mobility index is where we're creating an index to be able to identify our areas that are most vulnerable to heat. We can use this for awareness, communication tools, but also to help target and implement different policies and plans. There are specific indicators that can go into a heat mobility index. They're mainly the environmental exposure. For us, it would be high heat, sensitivity, as well as the adaptive capacity for your community. For our heat vulnerability index, we're looking at the environmental exposure of high heat and sensitivity for our community. For the heat exposure, you can see here, this is average at the block group level for morning, afternoon, and evening. And for our heat vulnerability index, we're using the evening temperature for a couple of reasons. We see the largest temperature differentials in the evening, and we also see that high nighttime temperatures have a higher correlation with negative health effects for communities. And so for our heat vulnerability index, we're specifically using the evening temperature you see on the right. And then for our next indicator, we are creating a sensitivity score. And we create the sensitivity score based on 6 different social demographic factors for the communities. We're looking at age, over 65 and under 5, educational attainment, race and ethnicity, language barrier, poverty, and social isolation. Something to pay attention to is the people who are most vulnerable in your communities are your elders who are living alone. And that's why we have 2 specific variables for that measure. We use a principal component analysis to combine all these variables into one sensitivity score. But it's important for communities to realize that they want to target specific demographics to also, use them separately in order to target plans for specific vulnerabilities. And so after we create our sensitivity score, we ranked order each of our vulnerability indicators, and we overlaid the heat exposure data with our sensitivity score and identified areas of block groups that had the highest ranking for both heat exposure and sensitivity. From that, we identify priority areas and identify 3 priority areas for Clarksville, 1, 2, and 3, 1 being red. You can see the sensitivity score underlaid below this map. These priority areas can be used in order to target plans for communication awareness, as we've talked about before. But I think also what's important here is for communities to use these as a guide, a way to guide plans, but also realize that you might want to use this differently. Say, for example, if you just want to target heat exposure, or if you just want to target sensitivity, that you can separate these as well and look at priority areas separately too. So I'm going to turn this over to Bronte so she can talk about how we're using both the Heat Vulnerability Index and other community needs assessment, and talk about the heat response plans and emergency response plans.
Excellent. So in June of this year, our town council passed our very first heat management plan for Clarksville. This plan is really going to guide this final year of the Beat the Heat program up until the spring in strategies that we're continuing to pursue, but it also does outline strategies that can be pursued in the long term as well. And we'll be updating it next spring to have more of that continuity plan in place so it can really guide those efforts. At the moment, it currently includes about 26 different action items that we're working towards, and they're divided into 4 sections. And I'm just going to briefly go over these because, as you can see, there are a lot of them, and if we were to talk through all of them, we'd be here all day. So I'm just going to give you guys just a quick look at some of these. So the first section here is the heat wave response protocol, and these are really strategies that are going to be implemented whenever a heat wave is imminent. So I'm thinking about getting alerts out to people about heat waves, especially cell phone alerts, something that's very convenient for people. Also thinking about cooling centers. There are a lot of different ways that we can approach opening and providing cooling centers to the community. And so we address that in a few ways. And also thinking about, during a heat wave, what are some strategies we can employ to support our most heat vulnerable residents as well. Also looking at public outreach. So how are we communicating to the public and educating the public about this issue? Are there opportunities to host workshops with our community, especially health and social service professionals who support the community as well? So that's something we're working on now as well. Also looking at home cooling. The burden of paying your energy bill or not being able to pay your energy bill and therefore being exposed to heat is something that is very important to begin addressing in the short term. And so looking at window unit assistance, utility bill assistance, different options there to begin addressing that issue is something we're looking at in the realm of home cooling. And then, of course, climate responsive design. So in addition to these other strategies, of course, how are we mitigating the urban heat island effect, and how are we really starting to think about approaching climate change as well? So we're doing this in a few ways. The first is, of course, through public design projects. So what can we be doing on the town's end, in the short term, especially, and in the long term as well. And so the plan includes some different ideas for projects, and I'll talk about some of those here in the next slide. Also looking at a sustainable development program. So really looking into, ways that we can either encourage, require, or incentivize more sustainable design elements throughout the community is something we want to explore in the next year as well. And then also looking at residential areas. So thinking about tree plantings and how we can really help and bolster the tree canopy within our residential areas is an important part of this strategy. So that's just a quick look at all of that. I do want to talk about specifically how we're using the maps themselves, though, to help guide some of our work. So over here on the left, we have our heat map. And this has been really helpful for thinking through targeted strategies for opportunities for tree planting, or even looking at cooling infrastructure and amenities. And so this map is really helping us think through this process right now, looking at different funding opportunities and how we can pursue some of that. Also looking at the heat vulnerability index, thinking about those residential tree plantings throughout neighborhoods. This map is helping us identify those most heat vulnerable neighborhoods and where we should be prioritizing that. So that's a really helpful tool there as well. But these can also help determine how we think about bus stops. What bus stops are located in our most heat exposed areas, and what kinds of amenities should we be prioritizing. Also looking at cooling centers. So where are our highest priority locations for cooling centers? And then also window unit distribution. If we're able to host a program like this, the heat vulnerability index can really help us through some of that decision making if it comes down to deciding which neighborhoods need to receive higher priority for this. So that's just a quick look at everything that we've been working on. I know that was probably a lot of information in 15 minutes. So if you guys have questions, things you're interested in, feel free to ask them now or follow up with us later. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Thanks, Bronte. Thank you, Dana. We appreciate that. Are there any questions or comments from anybody? Anybody in the room or anybody? Not seeing or hearing any.
Keith, I think it's a great idea. I really support what they're doing.
Great, thank you, Mayor. And this looks like something that would be really good for our cities. I'm Mount Washington.
How close is Clarksville to the Ohio River? I don't know, is it border? The Ohio?
Yeah, we're on the Ohio River.
Okay, I'm sitting here thinking, not knowing anything about anything, and thinking how easy it would be. I mean, it might be expensive, but how easy it would be to pump water from the Ohio River into parking lot areas. Just let a little glaze of water run over the parking lot on especially hot days. That may cost $50 million to get the thing over there, but it's just a dumb thought.
It's not a dumb thought. It's actually the presence of water in our cities that really cool down temperatures, near surface air temperature, and it's that evaporation process. And what we do so well in cities is we seal our land cover to really move water away and to seal water away. So we limit that evaporation process. So it's not a dumb idea at all to really think through how we can bring water back into our urban environment.
I'm also thinking about how clean the water is that we get from Louisville after it's been purified and do all the things they do to it. And I'm also now thinking about the fact that you're also pumping muddy water occasionally out of the Ohio River on your parking lots. That probably wouldn't sit too well with people around. So it's hot or be muddy, one or the other. But thank you, I'm just talking.
Thanks, Mayor. You're thinking about the old sprinkler systems we used to have when we were kids.
Exactly right. We pumped it out of the Salt River too.
Any other questions or comments? All right, well, we appreciate, and we have your all's information, so can people contact you all directly if they have more questions or comments?
Yes, we're putting it in the chat right now, putting our email addresses in there.
Thank you all very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Moving on, Nick, Amendment 8.
Thank you. Short presentation about Amendment 8. In your meeting packet, you should have the following Cover page, pages of, project, there's only 3, and then the amendment schedule. Comments have been received from the public, that occurred, that closed after the, Ttcc mail out, so we'll make, those have been sent out to TPC, and we'll have them in the TPC packet for a couple weeks from now. So Amendment 8 to the, Connecting Kentuckiana 2040 MTP and fiscal year 2020 to 2025 TIP, started, back in June. We received project applications from a number of sponsors, on the 14th, or up until the 14th. Staff spent some time reviewing those projects. There weren't many, and one of them was already an existing project, so there wasn't a whole lot to review in terms of these projects. They're pretty straightforward. The public comment period, let me back up. All of these projects are considered exempt from air quality in terms of needing to perform conformity to show how these projects impact our region. And so therefore, there is no air quality activity, and that normally adds, 45 to 60 days to the schedule as we work, as our staff, Randy Simon, works with Craig Butler and his folks over at APCD. So there was no need for that. So we went straight to the public comment period, knocked that out 15 days. We had an evening workshop. I don't think we had anybody attend on that one, but we did receive plenty of comments.
Yeah, we said a couple people joined, or one person joined for the.
That's right. We did have one or two folks join. So we are here today, again, those comments were sent to TPC. We're here today to get TTCC's recommendation to TPC. So what projects are included in Amendment 8? The Town of Clarksville Stanford Avenue Streetscape Improvements Project. This was actually just added to our MTP through Amendment 7. During the public comment process, there was some interest in whether there were going to be bike and pedestrian facilities included. And after that fact, Clarksville came back to us and wanted to clarify that there are going to be bike lanes and sidewalk upgrades on that roadway. So we are clarifying the project description, or modifying the project description. NDOT is going to be doing some pretty serious renovations on the Henryville Welcome Center there on I-65. So we're adding that to both the MTP and the TIP. There's funding associated with it. And then KYTC is doing maintenance on I-65 from mile marker 104.7 to 110.7. And that project has funding and is going in both the MTP. I can take any questions or comments about these projects. Otherwise, I will move to action requests.
Any questions or comments from anyone?
We are looking for TPCC recommendations for TPC to approve Amendment 8 to the MTP and TIP.
For a motion on that, I'll make that motion. So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
You have a second? A motion and a second. Any other questions or comments? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed? You've got it passed. Thank you, Nick. All right, moving on. We now have Elizabeth, the project evaluation process.
Very much. For the presentation. Very much. So today I'm here to present the final draft of the new project evaluation process for Connecting Kentuckiana 2050. An update to the previous evaluation, hopefully more streamlined, aligned with some of the new goals and objectives, and better representation all around of projects and their impacts. Just a reminder about where we are on the Connecting Kentuckiana 2050 schedule. We're right before project development. That's going to kick off August 8th, so we're right before this. This evaluation is crucial for getting the impact summary that you also see down there, and that final draft for adoption. Why do we have a project evaluation at all? First of all, we are required to discuss impacts that these projects have for the MTP on performance measures. Now that is a requirement for the federal measures, but we also have several MTO developed measures. Evaluation helps us collect and see what kind of impacts we're looking at with these projects. This evaluation also is used as a support tool for funding decisions. We do have, although we have more resources with the new bill, they're still limited, and we still have many projects and always new ones coming up that we do need to have something to help make those funding decisions. So what projects align most with the goals, and how can we prioritize those projects? I do want to step back for a second and go over some lessons learned from the previous evaluation with Connecting Kentuckiana 2040. We did see in this evaluation that we need to even the playing field, so to speak, particularly between large and small-scale projects. Naturally, the large corridor kind of projects scored really well, maybe too well, and some of those high-impact, low-cost projects that maybe were on a smaller scale just couldn't compete with how the evaluation was set up. So we saw that, and we also saw kind of disparity between those, especially if it was kind of a singular roadway project or a singular bike ped project. So we need that. We also wanted to simplify the criteria, make the process less time-intensive, both on collecting information from sponsors and also staff time, because that previous evaluation took many hours for staff to sit in a room and conduct those evaluations. We do want to continue utilizing data to assess projects, make this a very data-driven process. And then finally, we wanted to enhance the transparency with project sponsors and the public, so we all knew what was going on with the evaluation, and we felt comfortable saying, yes, these are our priorities based on their input, the goals, objectives, etc. To that end, to increase transparency, we did have a working group that was well attended. These are the goal of the working group and what we kind of talked about, and then that deliverable of this defined list of criteria and point awards that is in your packet. The working group consisted of someone from every county, with the exception of Indiana. There was at least one Indiana representative, and the state KYTC was also represented. So really good discussion, and Keith, do you want to say anything about that?
We had one, I attended one by Zoom and then one in person, and it was, input was great from everybody. It was really interesting to hear the different things that, depending on where you were from. For instance, some of the things from Metro that were a little bit different from what would be at Bullitt, but how just having those discussions was really great. I thought the input was really good. I did appreciate the fact that things that were most important to, for instance, for Bullitt County would be the economic development drivers because of, quite frankly, warehouses, things like that are coming in there, and we were able to not change the criteria, but we got it on the table that this was what was important, and everybody there had their say, and it was really good. And I really appreciated what came out of Metro from those discussions. It was a good learning process for me as well, but I just thought it was really good. And anybody that can take part in those, I would highly recommend it because it's a good exercise.
I echo that. We had fantastic feedback from staff's point of view. I think it really helped round out what we were missing in the evaluation just from this. Very much. Okay, so to dig into the evaluation, it is in your meeting packet, and I'm happy to answer any very specific questions that you have, but I wanted to go over kind of the high-level components of this evaluation. So, for projects, you're looking at two different components. Both of them are 100 points. They total 200 points total. So you have the common criteria that all projects will be evaluated on, and then we split it up into modes. There's roadway, transit, and bicycle and pedestrian projects, And then in each of those modes, there's 3 categories, so to speak: safety, mobility and access, and resiliency and sustainability. And those, in those categories, there might be anywhere from, I think, 1 or 2 to like 5 or 6 different criteria. And those all add up to the 50, 25 points, et cetera, whatever you see on the screen. Maintenance projects are not going to be evaluated. We're going to assume that maintenance projects are essential and that those have been vetted by the sponsors already. So we're going to say these are a priority. They are going to be marked as appropriately as a priority in whatever documentation we I do want to stress that we think this is simplified scoring. There's no need score or multiplication like there was in the previous evaluation. So this is simply, you have a possibility of 100 points in common criteria, 100 points in the modal. You can get anywhere from probably like more like 5 to the 100 points. I want to get an example. It might be a little small on the screen. But for example, in the roadway criteria, this is the safety category. And this is looking at, for considering vehicle crashes, non-motorized crashes, and the inclusion of proven safety countermeasures in the project. So for example, those 3 criteria would be evaluated for a roadway project. In red, we'll see point ranges. Those are still a little bit up in the air because we need to dig into the data a little further on some of these criteria for vehicle crashes and make sure that we're not giving everybody 10 points, or it's impossible to give someone 10 points based on how many crashes we have in our area. So we're still looking at those, but for approval today, those possible points on kind of the second to the right column are part of this approved evaluation, and we will stick to. And just a few final notes. We are unveiling a new project application along with this. It is, again, simpler, more streamlined, and we are going to be using Esri ArcGIS's Survey 123 because it has some enhanced capabilities that it didn't have a few years ago for mapping projects, and allows us to have a more streamlined process downstream with the geodatabase, with that and pushing out to our interactive maps down the road. We're also planning on using GIS, a model to run these evaluations to reduce staff time. This is also why you might see this evaluation is more data focused. Almost all these criteria are linked to a data set or 2 data sets, so we can use the GIS model. And then finally, we will be creating new supporting documentation and providing information at the workshop so that everybody knows what this new project application looks like, how to fill it out, just like we did last time, so there are hopefully fewer hiccups. Finally, I just need action requested to recommend TBC approval of the project evaluation process for the 2050 MTP. And I'll take any questions as well.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments for Elizabeth? Is there, I know there's a couple of folks that were in these meetings. Do you all have any comments about the process? I know, Dirk, you were very involved. Do you have any comments?
Well, I do, Keith. I kind of brought this up in my review. The criteria for roadway projects right off the bat, first thing at the top is average daily traffic, which is given the most points for 30 plus K, 30,000 cars a day or greater. But I just, I think of STBG, Surface Transportation Block Grant. I worry at times that if we build roadways with excess capacity, then we have more crashes and we have more aggressive driving. I think one thing we saw with COVID, fewer cars on the road, but the fatalities and aggressive driving went up. So I worry about overbuilding roadways. So the second criteria under the roadway projects was level of service. So we already know we have congestion, and we're solving that problem. And that criteria makes a lot of sense to me. The worse the congestion, the more the need for the project. But the total traffic volume alone is a factor. Higher traffic volume doesn't really, I don't understand why that would gain more points for a 30,000 cars a day over here on this roadway, but it's got plenty of lanes versus a 15,000 cars a day over here on this smaller road. But it's more something that you and I might be doing with STBG dollars. So that one criteria is the one that I've always struggled with, and wasn't really understanding why that's one of the criteria in this.
I'll add this. I think the intent there is revolves around the impact, right? If we're looking at a project that 30,000 cars a day traverse, on a facility that 30,000 cars a day traverse, you're impacting 3 times as many drivers or vehicles as you are on a 10,000. And so I think there's the impact is a reason why, but it's also a fraction of the points. That's for 5 versus the 15 for congestion. Okay, so the congestion is prioritized over just what type of road are you in the first place, or how many vehicles are on that road presently.
So I guess Andy, I'm thinking that there's not anything that's got 30,000 cars on a day right off the bat. It's a state road. It's not a local road. And state roads with that kind of traffic, they have federal funding sources that they can apply beyond STBG. So that's how I look at it. I was like, okay, so it's got a lot of cars on it, but then there's straight ST Surface Transportation Program funds that go right to the state that they can apply to those type of projects. Doesn't really need to tap into our STBG for those type of projects, and that's where I am. So,
Dirk, I think our friends from Clarksville might even say something like, well, Clarksville owns Lewis and Clark Parkway, and Clarksville has responsibility for maintaining roads like Veterans Parkway as well, and those are as busy and as heavily traveled and look just like KYTC routes in Jefferson County. And so
I agree with that, but then on the other hand, on Clarksville, on the Indiana side of the river, NDOT does not expend any of the dollars of STBG funds, whereas KYTC at times does get into our STBG pot, and that's different too. Anyway.
That the project evaluation is for all projects in the NTP regardless of funding source. So while the evaluation and the scores are sometimes considered as part of funding awards for those MPO dedicated funds, we're also just ranking everything in the NTP to have that holistic look at where the impacts are. So I think that could maybe be a discussion for MPO dedicated for that working group to say what they want to fund. But for the evaluation, like Andy said, this covers all jurisdictions, all projects in the NTP.
And I think too, Elizabeth's point about when she said working groups, and Dirk, you and I were part of this one, and again, I appreciate, that's why I called you out on this, I appreciate your comments. I think it leads to the point of having more of these working groups and having people get involved in these working groups so that we can really have these discussions. And is any plan perfect? It's probably not. I haven't seen one. But I think what was done with this group was good work. I think it's good work. And I think, Dirk, you would probably agree with that as well, because I think it was a worthwhile exercise. And again, I think that leads to the bigger question is we need to do more of these, have more involvement. That makes sense.
Well, and the group understanding of our needs and you know, sometimes, I'm sure everybody's like me. I get in my own little tunnel and I'm always focused only on Metro, but it's nice to be able to kind of see what everybody's doing in the surrounding, within the MPO.
Keith, may I say something?
Sure.
Of course, we're all here representing a particular area of KIPTA's region. And I take the position that anything good happening in Louisville or Clarksville or any other area, any other county in our KIPTA region, is eventually going to be good for any of us because we all travel the region. And whatever improvements we're making in one region, if it's Louisville, we're in Louisville every day. Now, I know Louisville's not in Bullitt County every day, but whatever happens good in Bullitt County or eventually in Clarksville or wherever it is good for all of us. That's my opinion.
I have a thought here, just following up on what Dirk was saying. Maybe we're talking about points involved in building capacity or inducing traffic versus calming or improving the traffic. Maybe that's the big issue. One of the issues Dirk had in mind.
Yeah, and I completely understand that. I believe the way this is written, that it is more focused on slightly, because it is very few points, slightly prioritizing roadways that have a lot of traffic rather than the type of improvement. So, you know, through our education, through what we're hearing from FHWA, that yes, we should be more hesitant to continue adding capacity. That gets to the types of projects that we're seeing. I don't think this criteria is necessarily the type of project, just where we should maybe be focusing more efforts given how many cars are on this road.
And I don't, you know, it's not as if you're going to get gobs of points for adding lanes on a roadway that has congestion or not. Assessment is more or less, is the road you have a project of virtually any variety on a road that has verifiable congestion right now. So, worth a little bit of boost.
Right.
Whether or not you're adding lanes or not, right? It could be a more modest project too. That's not adding an extra lane or two in each direction. Congestion exists there, so you know, it gets points for that, right? And a few points, to Dirk's point, a few points for having a level of traffic, as in number of vehicles, which is different than traffic as in congestion, right? There's two different parallel things here. Is it congested, or do people go there? Those might not be the same thing. Often they are. Many times they are. Firstmore Parkway they are, but other places they aren't.
Any other questions or comments? All right, at this time, is there a motion? I forgot how you wanted to put this.
A motion to approve the evaluation criteria for projects.
To send it to TPC?
Yeah.
Is that, okay.
Yeah.
Dirk, are you making that motion? Or are you just?
Yeah, I made that. I make a motion.
Dirk's made the motion. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Craig. We got a motion and a second. Any other discussion? When you're hearing none, all in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Got one. That, or no? Oh, it looks like it passed. We're good. Good to go. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you all very much.
All right, good discussion. Thank you all. Nick, you're back up with the project manager.
That's right. Thank you. This is a pretty quick item. I don't have a presentation for it. The project management guidebook is the document that TPC approved back in 2016 originally, and there's been updates to it along the way, most notably in 2020 when we kind of streamlined the process and the reporting. Today's update is pretty simple. It's all about including and adding the new MPO dedicated program that's going to be that is allocated to the TPC for award to future projects. That's the Carbon Reduction Program, or CRP. We are going to receive allocations of funding from both NDOT and KYTC for that program. So there's been documentation in here to update the language, to add that program. There's also one other section where we talk about the frequency of calls for projects, and it says, I think, 2 to 3 years, and we're changing that to 2 to 4 years. The consensus has kind of been from the Kentucky folks that having a call for projects every 2 years makes a lot of sense. We have a lot more funding in Kentucky. We can spread those dollars around because we don't have restrictions on carrying funds over. Whereas in Indiana, the small amount of funding, the $6 or $7 million we get every year, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense in time and energy for everyone to put into just a $14, $15 million call for projects. It doesn't stretch very far at all. So that's the only other update, I think, in addition to adding the carbon reduction program. So anyone have any questions or comments?
Nick? Seeing and hearing none, is there a motion to recommend Ttcc the approval of the project management guidebook update? A motion?
I'll make a motion to update the project management guide.
Second?
Second.
Got a second in the room. Any other questions or comments? You're hearing none. All in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you all.
All right, Alex, you are here to talk about the Safe Streets. And I know you all had one meeting today, and I know there's quite a few people that are signed up to go tomorrow.
Yeah. We look forward to seeing you there. So we've been talking a lot about the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant opportunity over about the last month. So I just wanted to give a quick update, and as the chair said, we'll be having a much more detailed meeting tomorrow at 2:45, all digital, over Zoom. So if anybody's interested, just do you want to put my email address in the chat, Greg, and then send me an email. I can send you over the invite if you haven't gotten that yet. But just to bring this everybody up to speed, Safe Streets and Roads for All is coming out of the bipartisan infrastructure law. It's a new competitive federal grant opportunity aimed at preventing roadway deaths and serious injuries. It is significant funding available. It's $5 billion over 5 years, $1 billion for fiscal year 2022. The application deadline is coming up in September. It's also, in the way it's sort of designed, very tailored towards groups of jurisdictions, and especially around MPOs are typically or specifically singled out. And it's a funding opportunity. We at KIPTA have been especially excited about it for a couple of reasons. The biggest and most important is we think it really unlocks access to a lot of potential additional funding around actually implementing a lot of these strategies and tactics for safer streets. We know that safety is a growing U.S. DOT priority, so we also think having a regional action plan in place is something that not only positions us for further Safe Streets for All funding, but also other competitive opportunities that might be out there. It's a great opportunity to sort of, with a combined economy of scale approach, create a safer regional transportation network. We have been, we've all looked at the data. Unfortunately, we don't have the safest region. A lot higher death rates than some regions. Good opportunity to start to take another chunk out of that. And then finally, for a lot of these local plans, these are things that even without the Safe Streets for All funding on the table, they're really useful for local jurisdictions to have. But if you're going out there on your own, these can be expensive planning processes. By sort of combining in the collective, we've got the ability for an economy of scale, so a lot more local jurisdictions have the ability to have these. So just an update for where we're at. Again, tomorrow, 2:45, we'll have a much more detailed presentation to sort of talk about, what might the specifics of a plan like this look like for the region or and give folks more focused time to ask questions. But ahead of that, we've had 14 local jurisdictions express interest in being part of the collective application. Not saying official commitments, but definitely interest. Let's talk. Let's see where this goes.
Louisville Metro has also expressed interest in being a partner on this. They'll be doing their own implementation grant application, but they're still interested in partnering with the rest of the region as we larger action plan going. We've been having ongoing conversations with a lot of knowledgeable folks in the region about this, talking with a number of consultants, staff at other agencies around the region, and even at other regions who have put these plans together, so we can have the most detailed understanding of what a plan like this could look like, what are the sort of different routes that we could go. Session, first one was 9 a.m. today, second one 2:45 tomorrow, and then after that we'll be doing individual follow-ups with anybody who's interested throughout the month of July. Which brings us to then the timeline for moving forward. So what we are hoping is that by August 1st, close of business, for anybody who is interested, that we can get a verbal or an email commitment, yes, we want to be in on this. Recognizing there may need to be some time to get the official go-ahead from whatever collective legislative body or process is needed to formally be a part of that. We're asking then for a formal written commitment from those jurisdictions by the 15th of August. We will do our best to send around a draft of the application, which is going to be a fairly straightforward application. It's mainly a bunch of data collection and a 300-word narrative. So nothing too onerous, but we'll be asking for comments back on that by the 22nd. The deadline itself is on the 15th of September. And the current timeline from the feds, we'll see if everything gets stuck to, but would be the end of January 2023 for awards being announced. And from our initial conversations from consultants, knowledgeable staff at other agencies, we're estimating sort of on the extreme fast end, 6 months for this process once you've sort of hit the go button. 16 months on the, we're having a little more leisurely pace, so say 12 months probably being what we're shooting for. But we can't see it here. Maybe y'all can see it on the screen at home, but there's one more line on there that notes, we'd be then looking at a 2023 or fiscal 2024 potential, and who's to say if this would be a regional application for an implementation, or if this is something that local jurisdictions or smaller groupings might do. A lot of this would probably be something we'd be wanting to talk about as part of the action plan process. There's a lot of intangibles still to be figured out as we go along, but that would be the timeline to sort of look for that. So don't need any action on this today, but happy to answer any questions that I can't answer in the meantime.
Questions or comments for Alex? Seeing none, we'll see you tomorrow.
Cool, thanks, sir.
Thank you. Let's see, Nick, you're back up.
Back up, here we go. We are talking about our MPO dedicated funding program. This is a quarterly project review. Greg is pulling up a presentation right now. We did have a number of funding applications during the past quarter. And we met with our Indiana project sponsors a couple weeks ago and had our quarterly project review meeting. There was no, since we've updated the project management guidebook, there in Kentucky, we only hold those meetings twice a year, along with those progress reports. So we'll have a meeting coming up in the next couple months with our Kentucky project sponsors. Real quickly, I've added the carbon reduction program to the list of programs for both Indiana and Kentucky. Obviously, for Indiana, we are into fiscal year 23. It started July 1st, so no funds have been obligated, but there should be obligations for the Every Commute Counts program and the CARE, APCD's CARE education program pretty shortly here if they haven't already. In Kentucky, we are 3 months out from the end of the fiscal year, and so we are, I've added the CRP program there. At the beginning of the year in the STBG program, Surface Transportation Block Grant, we started with about $97 million programmed. We're up to $7.7 million obligated, and we've shifted about $8.2 million to future phases. We are always hoping to hit obligate at least as much funding as we receive this fiscal year, and that would be $24.7 million for this program. In most years, the last few months are typically the busiest months in terms of obligations in Kentucky, at least since I've been doing this. In the TA program, we started with about $5.2 million. There's been only $185,000 obligated. I know there's a couple of large construction phases out there that sponsors are hoping to get to this fiscal year. And to hit our goals of not adding to the carryover balance in that program, we would need to obligate $2.3 million. Recent obligations that have occurred. Clarksville and Jeffersonville have a joint transportation alternatives project on Montgomery Avenue and 9th Street, where those streets cross under I-65. They want to obviously build a new multimodal connection. And so the railroad phase, there's some railroad improvements that have to be done prior to construction taking place later in fiscal year 23. New Albany East Main Street project. This is a huge reconstruction project. Obviously, bids on both sides of the river and all across the United States are coming up, 20 and 30, sometimes 50% higher than estimates from 6 months ago, due to materials, costs, labor shortages, and all sorts of other things, not to mention. So were able to obligate. It was they barely beat the timeline, but they did obligate $3.9 million for that construction phase. So I imagine they'll be going out to getting ready for construction activities pretty soon. In Oldham County, the Spring Hill Trace Sidewalk Project. This is a short sidewalk from Kentucky 329 to just beyond Spring Hill Court. That has gone to construction, so it's always good to see these construction phases occurring. Likewise, the Buckner Connect, or the new connection from Old LaGrange Road to Kentucky 393. Those funds were obligated for construction. In Kentucky, I want to say when this packet was mailed out, we did not have a request for a cost increase at that time. We have since received one from the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet for US 42. This is a really important project to widen US 42 in Oldham County from 2 to 3 lanes. They needed some additional funding for some parcels to acquire via the right-of-way process, and so we have funds available, and staff recommends approval of these. Before I ask for action, is there any comments or questions about the programs, projects, specific projects, or otherwise?
Other comments for Nick? And hearing none, is there a motion to recommend to TPC the cost increases?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Jim. Is there a second?
I'll second. Jim Urban.
Jim, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions or comments, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Passes.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Nick. Alex, you're back up with the Department of Transportation Navigator.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I get to, I think, close everybody out today with just a quick FYI tidbit on some new US DOT programs that are aimed really to help local jurisdictions better navigate the federal funding process and be on a more even playing field than kind of the larger jurisdictions. One is a way for local agencies, governments to better understand the ins and outs of federal funding, and one is an actual additional funding opportunity for technical support. So first up, we have U.S. Department of Transportation Navigator, which is designed to help communities that may not be familiar with the federal funding process to actually navigate that process. Basically sort of federal funding 101, if you will, plus a landing page or maybe a one-stop shop for federal resources that could be helpful in that process. So, I know a lot of agencies in this body have long experience with federal funding. There's probably not anything real new there that you're going to see, but for some of our local jurisdictions that are short-staffed or maybe don't have the experience, or might just have new staff coming on who need that guidance, transportation.gov.dot/navigator. It's got, I looked through it just coming up to this meeting. There's so many different spots on there. Just any questions you have, a really good 101 overview, as well as just a great spot for where can I find this on the DOT website? Where can I find this? Which they sort of didn't have all compiled in one place, so a really helpful resource there. As a companion piece, they're also rolling out the Thriving Communities program. They're sort of introducing it right now. There's going to be a notice of funding opportunity coming up in the fall, but it is basically a joint HUD and USDOT grant opportunity effort. It's around providing technical assistance, again, for these smaller or disadvantaged communities in planning for projects. And the aim is to provide targeted support to really build up the local ability to actually be able to take advantage of these programs. So, so many of the potential grant opportunities out there require entities to have this plan or that plan in place ahead of time. And for a lot of our smaller jurisdictions, that may not be possible. This is something where potentially with a little bit of technical assistance, you might be able to get something like that together for priority projects, and then this year, but maybe next year, be more competitive in applying for some of that federal support. They're still a little vague in the guidance on exactly what that is going to look like with the notice of funding opportunity. They just said in fall, and more details will come out. It's definitely something that we as KIPTA staff will be watching, and happy to, if there's any particular questions anybody has, again, feel free to email me, and I'm happy to poke around and try and get some more specific answers ahead of time. That's all I got. No action needed. If there are any questions, happy to take them.
Any questions for Alex? None. Thank you, Alex. Appreciate it. All right, other business. Andy, you had some things you wanted to add.
Just real quick, it's probably all news to many people in the room or in the virtual room. KYTC's 2022 highway plan has now been, enacted highway plan has been published. I guess by published, it's been posted. It's out on the website now, so I'll put that link in the chat for those that are out there. So you can peruse that at your own leisure. What that probably will result in a number of months, let's say, is probably, Nick presented Amendment 8 today. I imagine Amendment 9 will be a part of some of will include a lot of the changes, the changes that are in this highway plan versus the others. So we'll get that sorted away here in the coming weeks and months with the Transportation Cabinet, and it's also perhaps another opportunity for any other projects to make their way into the MTP and TIP, because looking downstream, you remember that schedule that Elizabeth put up there, probably our last amendment before we update those documents. So you need something in there before April. That'll be the opportunity at the same time. So kind of two birds with one stone type thing. Anybody from KYTC want to add anything to that?
No, I think the district generally tries to handle that, and we recognize that PO has a training program for the input of data for project data, and we were going to sort of make our way through that training, which we're scheduled for before we would start logging information to them.
Yeah, we're following the cabinet's lead on that one, right? In terms of the timing of when we.
Yeah.
When.
Well, I think the training's coming up here in the next week or.
When are those workshops, by the way? Was that?
End of July, and Nick was.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that actually. So speaking of, MTP and TIP project development for the next documents, as well as the 2022 MPO dedicated calls for projects, we've got workshops set up to go over the new application form, which will be much easier to use. And also, processes for if you're just making minor tweaks to existing projects, you might not have to do as much. So there's gonna be a lot of details about that process. And so July 25th was one of the dates, and this went out to all TPC and Ttcc members. Feel free to forward it on to anybody you need that think should know about it. July 25th, and it's an AM meeting. And
10:30.
August 3rd, Wednesday in the afternoon, I believe.
At 1:30, yes.
There you go. So we will have those opportunities to make sure we provide all the relevant information you need to help you guys get those project changes and whatnot into the MTP and TIP. Anybody have any questions about that? I have some other things, grant opportunities wise, that I want to just plug.
Related to all of that is I was curious if the MPO was issuing some sort of recommendation or guidance regarding projects that locals might be applying for funding for, like bill grant type projects. does the MPO have a recommendation whether, like, local agencies should be programming those in the MTP as a measure to show that the project is, programmed in a regional document? Because that, generally speaking, a project gets better points in a competitive grant, arena when it's programmed in the MTP.
Indeed, that's a fact. Yeah, you definitely, if you're planning on applying for a discretionary competitive type grant opportunity, you know, submit that project as soon as you have the concrete details of it, so we can add it to our MTP. Like Tom mentioned, the feds love to see that it's not just a project that's just, you know, come out of nowhere. It's actually in a plan, it's in a regional plan, and those things can be important. Speaking of grant opportunities and discretionary grant opportunities, in Indiana, I believe the state's community crossing grant opportunity just opened up. I know our Indiana LPAs are always on top of those deadlines. I think they do those twice a year, but that's some supplemental funding that the state can provide on a competitive basis for some transportation projects. There's a number of deadlines coming up of other federal highways and U.S. Department of Transportation grants. Alex mentioned, and he's filled us all in on the Safe Streets for All, that deadline being September 15th. But on September 8th, the Bridge Investment Program, the deadline to apply for those funds. So if you've got a bridge that you've not been able to get funded through, you know, whether it's the MPO dedicated programs or a state-funded program, if you've got a bridge that's got a cost over $2.5 million, there is funding out there to the tune of well over $200 million, if not more. So that's an opportunity to seek additional funding for bridge improvement projects, bridge rehabs, and that sort of thing. And then the Reconnecting Communities pilot project is going through the Office of Secretary Buttigieg, and that is it's all about kind of removing those barriers, similar to like maybe a 9th Street here in Louisville. I know Louisville Metro's talked about that. So there's planning grants and there's construction grants for that grant opportunity, and that deadline is October 13th. To plug those grant opportunities.
I put in the chat, I tried to keep up with Nick because there's so many of them, but I tried to put some links in the chat. That last one, by the way, would be a link to KIPTA's tip page where we are trying to do now more than ever because there's so many of them in play. Make sure that we post the external grant opportunities, a little bit of information with a link that gets you lots of information, right? Try to keep it as many people as up to date as we possibly can, but it's a fluid situation, right, to say the least, right now with all the grants.
I just want to mention the Indiana MPO conference, October 4th to the 6th. Registration is now open for that, as well as we're putting together the agenda. So if anybody would like to present as well, there's links to our website on there, and also sponsors. So
absolutely. Just because it's the Indiana MPO conference, it would be amazing if KIPTA, TPC, and Ttcc member agencies showed up because two reasons. One, it'd be great to get the local support, but two, you would learn a lot. I promise you would. And it would be just because you're going to hear a presentation about what's going on in South Bend, Indiana, doesn't mean that that's not very pertinent to Shepherdsville or Mount Washington, Kentucky. That's why not, type thing. So I would encourage everybody to consider attending. We got some interesting speakers lined up already. We've got some mobile workshops / tours lined up already. We got some fun. We got at least one reception and an after-hours event scheduled already. And so take a look at our. We'll put it in the chat too. Our conference website. And if you have any questions whatsoever about that, please let us know. And if you know any good speakers if you're not the best if you don't want to speak, but you know somebody that says, I bet that'd be good for the Indiana MPO conference, even if it's a Kentucky topic, take them. We'll take them. And even better, if you know somebody that might want to sponsor an Indiana MPO conference. We are very open for sponsors. I think we've got another one that came in today, and so that we're up to maybe a half dozen or one or more, and so we're hoping for more. Obviously, we are. So thank you all for your support in that endeavor, and it should be a fun event, and it's something we're looking forward to hosting, and it's something that we're looking forward to showcasing our region, not just the Indiana portion of our region, but our entire region at that event.
Any other discussion? need to be brought before this group? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
I hear a second. All right.